this week's episode of the High Ground Podcast. I am excited because we're going to jump into the original trilogy, and I got some awesome guests of a few couple first timers and a couple all stars. So yes, we're going to have a lot of fun here on the High Ground. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the High Ground Podcast. We are hanging out here. This is episode 77, I believe. So feels weird. Feels weird doing this for so long, but it is awesome. I want to start by going around the room and having y'all introduce yourselves. So I'll ask, who are you? Where can we find your amazing content? And the icebreaker question I chose this time is, you're going to be born into the Star Wars universe. Any time period, any place, you get to choose who your parents are. Or it could even be a single family home. That's cool too. Yeah. Who are you? When will you be born, and who are going to be your parents? And I will go to Victoria first.
Hey y'all, it's Victoria, y'all, on TikTok and Instagram. On Twitter, I am Victoria Vader 13, and one day I'm gonna get the courage to ask It's Victoria, y'all, for their handle. But today is not that day, so just keep hyping me up for that. One day I'll send them a DM. But yeah, for now I'm on TikTok and Instagram, and the parents I would want in the Star Wars universe. I feel like families have some bad luck in this universe, and so I'm drawing a little bit of a blank. I'm thinking maybe I would want, I know this is gonna come out of like left field, but maybe like I don't know. The first thought I had was like maybe like, I don't know, Piet or even Ozzel, because they would be gone and busy all the time. Like if they could, like,
wow,
if they were a little like a couple.
I've never would have thought someone would have said Admiral Piet as a father figure or a father. Wow,
they would be gone. Okay, they would like.
I love it. I appreciate it.
I do have to shout out really quickly about my shirt. My husband got it yesterday for Christmas. It says "Tall, Darth, and Handsome," and it's Darth Vader. And when he opened his gift, he started laughing, and his parents were like, "Oh no, do you hate it?" And he said, "No, I don't hate it, but I know I'm never gonna wear it." And they're like, "Because you hate it?" And they're like, "No, because my wife's gonna steal it." So, debuted tonight on the High Ground Podcast.
I love it. It's glorious.
Thank you.
Speaking of glorious, we have the beard, the greatest beard. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and yeah, who would you want to be have as parents in the Star Wars universe?
I'm Brian with the beard on TikTok and Ginger Beard Man on Twitter. If I had to choose parents in the Star Wars universe, I'd probably go with Han and Leia, because I could also be a trouble-causing kid. Little dark side, little not, like that kind of thing. So I think that'd be fun.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. I mean, we know that the track record canonically isn't the best, but you're nothing like, that has just as much to do with the kid as it does the parents, How about you, Xanthi?
I think if we're talking about pre-established parents, I think Bail Organa, like Bail and Brea, would probably be good choices.
Absolutely. And where can we find you and all your amazing content?
I'm Xanthi, Star Wars Music Minute, and you can find me on all platforms, I believe, at Star Wars Music Minute. I'm sort of new to TikTok, so I'm trying. At Star Wars Music Minute, and on Twitter at Star Wars Musmin, and on YouTube, Star Wars Music Minute. I have a podcast called Star Wars Music Minute. Wow. And the point of the podcast is to go through the Star Wars films in chronological order of each film, like 5 minutes at a time. So basically each episode goes like very deep dive analysis into the music and sound contained within single 5-minute chunk. I see Star Wars Lawyer in the comments. We recorded earlier today, so he's my next
Oh,
guest. We're talking about
awesome.
the scene, the cantina scene of A New Hope.
Right.
That
That's-
5-minute chunk.
That's super cool. I've had the pleasure of being on that podcast, and it was a lot of fun and amazing. And I'm happy that we were able to become friends based off of that.
Me too.
Last but certainly not least, we have P Thug in the chat here. Fun story. One of the original podcasts that I listened to that inspired me to start making content was one of Paul Herman's here. It's not around anymore, but yeah, let us know what you're currently doing.
Yeah.
And who your parents would be.
Okay. I got all kinds of stuff going on. My name's Paul Herman. I'm on the, for Star Wars purposes, I'm on the Saga Continues podcast with my good buddies Kyle and Tim. I was on Blaster Cannon podcast with my friends Saf and Megan, that Darth Charco himself. He's the one that's how he discovered us, or me, I should say. And then, yeah, so you can check out those podcasts. I think it's still up there, but for my regular Star Wars content, it's all on the Saga Continues. We have a blast. I love those dudes. They're great. You can find me on Twitter, Herman22 with 2 N's, aka P Thug. And I'm also on a MCU podcast called the MCU Fan Show. We just had a 4-hour No Way Home review, and I'm not joking. 4 hours. So
Yeah, that tracks.
I have to be really careful. You're gonna just mute me sometimes just to shut me up. So anyway, if you like Marvel content, go there, because I talk ad nauseum about that and mispronounce and forget people's names constantly, which I get yelled at by people on Twitter and tell me I should be replaced. But I digress. But yeah, so you can find me all that stuff there. And Xanthi, your podcast sounds awesome, by the way. I'm stoked to listen to that. So I'm a
Thanks.
musician myself. So
Sweet.
yeah,
I'm
so
somewhat
It's
of
on
a
YouTube as
scientist
well,
myself.
people, if you don't want to listen to,
yeah.
if it helps to have the visual.
No, it's cool. I'm stoked. I'm stoked to check that out. My parents, that's an easy one. For me, it's gonna be C-3PO and R2-D2. Like, it's gotta be them, because like they're like basically built-in nanny droids. So, I mean, it's what and this is the truth be told, C-3PO is my favorite all-time character.
Oh, one of mine too. Definitely favorite droid.
Dude. All right. Girl, me and you, we got this. Musician, C-3PO. You're my favorite already. I like this.
You're in good company.
Excellent.
For me, I would say you know what? My mind just went straight to Lando and L3, but that seems like a bad idea. I don't know. We'd have fun though. We'd have a lot of fun. That'd be for sure. Real quick in the chat, there's a lot of people Star Wars Lawyer, like you said, says Xanthi, fancy seeing you here. I'm being asked how I am. I'm doing well. We got Madison was on the mall episode back in the day. I'm sure she's here supporting Victoria. Yeah, we have the best people here. Galactic Mermaid also says the Organas seem like a great option. Cal, I missed the first one, but Poe and Finn. Let's see, Satine and Obi-Wan. I feel like that's cheating, but that is
cheating.
Perfect. That is the best one.
That is.
I don't think it's
Darth
cheating.
Vader, you won.
Yeah, why is it cheating?
Yeah, it's anybody. I could pick
I mean-
Jabba the Hutt and the Gamorrean Guard if I wanted to, right?
That's true. That's true. That might be a good pairing as well.
Mhm.
But if we're looking,
Protective.
same. Acrylic Coffee Works. Can I have Ahsoka as an adoptive parent? Luke, Padawan's podcast says Ahsoka in Lux. I don't know about you.
Oh, I remember Lux.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like her first like love interest in Clone Wars, but he was like Lux Bondi or something, right? That's his name.
Lux Bonteri, yes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, he's like kind of fancier than her, and
Mhm.
they kind of had a thing anyway.
And we have Thane and Sienna.
I
They-
thought about that.
but don't just don't talk politics at the kitchen table. And you'll be all right. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
If you haven't read Lost Stars, please do. It's amazing.
hmm
Yeah, I read it as soon as Shaka, when we were hanging out like a few weeks ago, when you all were like, "Have you read Lost Stars yet?" And I was like, "Not yet." It's I probably should, right? That day I got it and like bros like breezed through it and was like, "Oh my god, this is like one of the best Star Wars books."
Yeah.
It's good.
Enchanting.
I was telling him on our last podcast, we just deep dived on like a bunch of current comic books. I was telling him that I love the manga of Lost Stars. So if you guys
Yeah.
are manga fans, like I
Mhm.
haven't read all of them, but the first volume was beautiful, and I love the book. I'm not a big novel person. I'm audiobook only, and my ADHD does not let me dive into novels very often. So comic books are always the perfect thing. And the manga I thought was really, it looked beautiful. So if you guys like the novel, highly recommend the manga.
Yeah, it is. I haven't read all of it either, but like there are some scenes that just like they just break my heart. They're just so adorable, you know. But yeah, all right. Jumping into it, we're talking original trilogy. I just want to get quick hits from everyone. We're gonna kind of like roll these next two together. And so, just really quickly, how were you introduced to the original trilogy? Because I'm sure all of us found Star Wars at different time points. And also, is there a character that you think we deserve more than we got? And I'm gonna go to Brian first.
Oh, we'll start with me. Okay, so I got into the original trilogy at like honestly before I can remember. Like when I was like 2 and 3, I would come down. Like I'd be the first one to wake up on the weekends, and so I'd come down, and my parents had like a bottle of juice in the fridge for me, and I'd go in the family room and just grab a VHS tape and like stick it in the TV, and we had a box set of the original trilogy, and that's what I watched on repeat like forever. So like I was watching Star Wars before I could even remember watching Star Wars. And so who deserved more than we got from them? I'd say I'm gonna give you two. It would be Lando and Boba Fett. And luckily, it seems like both those characters now are getting more than they got back then. So I think we're doing okay now.
Yeah. Who was Star Wars Explained was just doing some content about how there was actually like a lot more that was supposed to happen with Boba Fett, and George Lucas was like, you know what, just throw in a bit. Like, things weren't working out, which is a very Lucas thing to do.
Exactly, very Lucas.
Yeah.
How about you, Xanthi?
I don't really remember how exactly I got introduced to Star Wars, but my brother and I both suddenly knew about it at some point when we were like very young, elementary school, and yeah, I knew, like, I was talking about Star Wars with my brother, and we would talk about it like before, like I feel like Star Wars was part of our lives before we even saw it really. So like I didn't even know what I was talking. I just knew that there was like a character named Jabba the Hutt, and I knew that there was like this character named Vader. It's like I already knew so much about Star Wars like before I even saw Star Wars. So yeah, I guess I just knew. And then the first thing I saw in theaters was, this is probably why there was talk about it at the time, but it was Return of the Jedi special edition. And yeah, that was my first theatrical Star Wars. And then the first one that I remember was Phantom Menace.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, so your first experience was the Aloha Gookie, yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful.
I've still never seen the original, like the despecialized.
Whoa,
But
whoa, crazy. This
not
is
really
blowing my
though.
mind.
It's hard to like.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love it. Oh, and then the other question: was there anyone you wish we got more of?
Oh, okay. Well, if it's phrased like that, then honestly, not really. I don't feel like I don't feel like there are any. I don't feel like there are any characters that I needed more about. I certainly like. I don't know. I like Jabba the Hutt. Like I think I always thought Jabba the Hutt was like really fun as a kid. I don't know. I just
Yes.
Jabba
He's
was
a
like
fun
so
guy.
fun to just like I don't know talk about and
Well,
play. And stuff.
His little buddy was
I
always
love
having a
Java
blast.
too. Love Java.
And I don't think it's really hard for me to because Star Wars is so part of me that it's hard for me to actually think about what more I would want. And also I'm so used to there being so much content filling in gaps all the time now that like I actually would take a step back and say that there are characters that I didn't need as much material about later. Or that like even if I did or that I don't think I need to fill in gaps super fast. Like I think it's really exciting when I don't know something about Star Wars. And so that's where I am right now is like I love when there's stones still unturned.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's why I like, I'm a big fan of the time jumps because we get to like jump into the interesting, and then they can fill in that if we want to like dig in there. But how about you, Paul?
Well, so for me, I grew up on it. Basically, I knew it from birth. I knew two things growing up instantly, and it just was ingrained in me. And it was Star Wars and Spider-Man. Those are the two things I grew up and just I knew it from the start. My earliest memories are probably watching Empire Strikes Back with my my family. I have a brother who's 6 years older than I am, so I think so. He got a bunch of toys, and I inherited. And we shared a lot from each other. The interesting thing for me is, and I love telling the story because I just think I think it's cool. But it's just me. Maybe I'm biased in my own story. But when growing up, I only knew Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I had no idea there was another film before Empire Strikes Back. So when I was in kindergarten, I don't, I forgot how old that is, but I remember being in the car and I'm just a diehard Star Wars fan. I mean, I have a bunch of toys or whatever. And my mom's like, "Oh, Paul, the first Star Wars movie is coming on tonight." And this is like late 80s. So I think this is like only like the second time I think A New Hope would be on like CBS or something like or second time. But I'm like, "Oh, Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi." No. It's the first one. I'm like, the first one? And I had no idea that there was a movie before. And my parents were like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, who's in it?" Well, Luke's in it and C-3PO and R2-D2. I'm like, "Really? What about Lando?" Nope. Yoda? Nope. I'm like, just like, what? It's so weird. So I always say that A New Hope is my first prequel. Because it really was, and it's so different. I mean, it's so 70s. The film stock, everything is so 70s that it just looks so different to me. It's just like a different era. It feels like, even though it's only like what 2-3 years later or whatever. So, that was my experience of growing up with Star Wars. But I had a crap load of the toys, and yeah, I just recorded them off TV. I remember. I think I'm the oldest here, which feels really weird. I think I'm the oldest. Pretty sure I am. But this is at a time where you could only rent VCRs, basically. So we had to rent a VCR from the video store, rented Return of the Jedi. And I remember watching Return of the Jedi the day we had to return it, everything. And I just bawled my eyes out. Cause I was like, "No, they're back." So I was way ahead of my time. I was all about home video even before everyone else was, I think. But yeah, no, I grew up on it. It's ingrained in me. It's one of those things. I've seen it. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen those movies. They've seen them a zillion times. And as far as character we ever got a lot of, I agree with you, Zany. Basically, I feel like mostly everyone's had a pretty good a good rushed out. I mean, yeah, like maybe a couple of characters here and there. The one I think retroactively is the most glaring, which everyone loves to criticize, is Boba Fett, because everyone's like, "Why is he so popular? He's only on screen for like 5 minutes." That whole argument. So I'd say in retrospect, I think it's obvious you probably would keep Boba Fett alive maybe throughout the trilogy or throughout the end battle for Endor or something like that, and not kill him off in the Sarlacc pit. I'm assuming so. That's what I would say probably is the one we should have got a little bit on because. But obviously Lucas was done by that point with Return of the Jedi. He was like, "Get me out of here." So, but yeah, that's where I would take it at this point.
I mean, it's like I always say, done is better than perfect. And he's like, "All right, print it, ship it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it." They're like, you can't
It's
tell the
Xanthi, by the way.
Yeah. You
Called me zany.
I'm sorry. I'm
It's
so
all right.
sorry. I'm the worst at like pronouncing everything. So just tell me to shut up. And say it's I just said it wrong. And so I again, future. I'm so sorry.
Fine.
Xanthi, right? Xanthi. Right?
Xanthi.
Xanthi. I'm so Xanthi.
It's fine.
Don't be like me. Don't be like me. All right. Sorry. Xanthi. All right. Thank you.
It's all good. And then how about you, Victoria? I've always just loved your story of.
So, Revenge of the Sith was coming out in theaters, and my parents were like, "Oh, well, you probably need to have some background to this." And so they were like, "Oh, we're gonna start with A New Hope, watch all the original trilogy, then watch the prequel trilogy 1 and 2 before we take you to the theater to see Revenge of the Sith." And then they changed their minds. So I saw episode 4, A New Hope. And then I went and watched episode 1 and 2 on I guess VHS or DVD. I think it was a DVD at that point. And then we went to the theaters to see Revenge of the Sith. So I had been introduced, kind of my orientation to Star Wars is through Darth Vader. So I'm going to be speaking a lot through that lens. But I knew who Darth Vader was without knowing who he was. So he was a totally separate character to me that I already loved. And then I go and I watch episode 1 and 2, and I'm like, yeah, this Anakin guy, super cool, right? Episode 3, we're in the middle of the theaters. Spoiler alert, he is Darth Vader. And it starts to happen. Mustafar starts to happen. And I like look over at my mom, and she said my eyes were like bawling, crying. She had to take me out of the theater because I was crying so hard. And I was like, I don't want to ruin this experience for people, but like it's too much for my little 9-year-old heart. But so needless to say, that's how I got introduced to Star Wars, was just through it's a culture, it's a family, and I feel like everyone came to Star Wars through someone else, and that's how a lot of people that's I know that kind of touches on one of the questions later. How do these movies hold up so well? But I mean, it's a culture, and something like a family that people can build by sharing it with others. And so it's always cool hearing how everyone gets into Star Wars, because it always 9 times out of 10 involves something connected to someone else. And then what character deserved more than we got? I would tend to agree that in the original trilogy, you looking at it by itself, you look at these characters and you feel that these missing pieces are satisfying. These holes are satisfying because you can fill them in with your imagination, and I think that's what makes a really powerful story. I would love a little bit more. I know this kind of also touches on a later question, but I would like to see more of the like, I don't know, Leia's journey, I guess, maybe through her perspective. I think this is also on my mind because I just saw the new Sword Art Online movie, and just like that shift in perspective of the same material is really, really beautiful. And so I think seeing the original trilogy like oriented around Luke, I would be interested to see the original trilogy oriented around Leia. Obviously,
That's interesting, because that's what I really want the sequel trilogy told from Ben's point of view. I think that would be really interesting, personally. But I've never thought about like that. I also have a Terry Tan in the chat saying I got into Star Wars through my kids.
That's my
beautiful.
I figured as much, so that's why I'm going to call it out. But it brings families together, and that's wonderful. Sorry, you were going to say something else, Victoria?
I forgot. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I mean, for me, I've told my story many times here, but it's just rewatching Empire Strikes Back over and over and over again on a VHS tape. I had really it was like recorded off of TV at some point in time. I don't even know if the entire movie was recorded. You know how you like it would start and you'd have to like run and grab the tape and put it in there and try to catch all of it.
Yeah.
And then
And stop at the commercials.
Yeah, exactly. So just like cuts and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But so I watched that tape until it broke, and then that's around the time the re-releases were coming out into theaters. So it was a great time to be alive. But as far as characters to see more of, I was endlessly fascinated by the bounty hunter meeting, and I'm like, all of these guys look crazy and weird. Is that a weird robot bug man? Like, what is happening here? As a child,
Mm-hmm.
if I were to pick one, it'd be Bosk, though. I mean, I love my big lizard dudes. That's why one of my favorite characters from Legends is Saba 17. Just big lizards. Give them to me all day.
Where's that from?
I want to see the lizards.
What character is that from?
Saba 17 is a character from Legends. That's who actually trains Leia in Legends, and is a big
really?
part of it throughout
Oh.
the major storylines. And then it gets kind of weird in like Legacy of the Force, where she hides in the temple and then has a bunch of lizard babies, and then they wreak havoc.
Okay, yeah, because I jumped because my main Legend stuff as far as post Return of the Jedi pretty much ends right before I think like these Vong show up. So maybe if it's a little bit before then yeah, I kind of check out before then.
Okay. No, it's after. Well, it's both before and after that, but she's a background character for most of the time.
Okay.
But yeah, let's jump into it. All right, A New Hope. This is one of a kind. This type of film has never been created except for Japanese films that very heavily inspired it. But yeah, what jumped out at you on this? I kind of want it to be open forum and talk about the things that you love about A New Hope. I guess I'll pick someone that randomly get us started, but let's go with Xanthi.
So A New Hope is like, I find it intimidating to talk about, and since that's the current season that my podcast is on, like I was really intimidated going into the season because A New Hope is like, it's been talked about so much and a lot of smart things have been said about it, and that's on the musical side as well. The original trilogy films sort of, they blend together for me as original trilogy kind of, and I would have to say that like Return of the Jedi was always the most distinct film to me growing up, and A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back were sort of like all one. But now that I'm going through it 5 minutes at a time, something that really strikes me about it is how fast paced it is, like how quickly it moves from one place to another, like how fast the plot develops. Really, like a lot happens in every like 5 minute chunk. It's astounding. It's a very like lean score as well. Yeah, it's just very efficient.
That's interesting. I because I always think like for me it feels like the beginning part with the droids just wandering in the desert feels really long to me. I know Lucas wanted it longer because he loves that, but yeah, no, that's cool.
Piggybacking off what you said, it's crazy because I think that movie definitely is like you said too, Jar Taco. Like it's Lucas wanted it longer, and if you watch the Empire of Dreams documentary, which is phenomenal, if you guys haven't seen that, that is a phenomenal documentary. If you're a Star Wars fan, you haven't seen it, you got to just after this, go watch it. It's incredible. I've seen it like 100 million times. I swear I watch it like twice a year. It seems like. when the editors are talking about the movie, it'll show you like deleted scenes, like, when they're kind of talking about like the pacing and how Lucas really struggled with the pacing, and him and Marshall Lucas and I think Paul Kirsch, I think his name is. They talked about the editing, and it just was just slowing down, and they just went through and just cut. And I think that's what's really fascinating about what you said, Xanthi, that it pretty much is like, it is more fast paced than people give it credit for, honestly, because you're right. It's moving plot constantly. In the medium film, you can't waste time. You're always constantly having to move, things forward. And when you have a lot of mythology, you're just, you're having to weigh around. You have every second is so precious of establishing what you're doing in this new universe you're doing. And I think that's the one thing, A New Hope, you look at it, even though it's, over 40 years old now or whatever. And I think it stands the test of time is because it really is a template of how you introduce a mythology to a new audience and how you do it naturally without exposition dumps every 5 seconds, which is very much the typical way of most people, especially back then. Like, let's explain everything right here. Lucas, he's such a visual person. That's why I love Lucas so much, because I feel like I'm a lot like him in the sense of where only because we're both visual people, and it stops there. But I'm such a visual learner and just person that I think he uses that language to explain everything. That's why he wanted a lived-in universe and make everything dirty. He was establish the fact that this is a totally different mindset of this world's lived in. It's got history. What does that all mean? And gets you thinking. Those are all things that are important to him. I think that's what's so great about A New Hope and all of the original trilogy films, or Star Wars in general. But I think A New Hope by itself, for me, and truth be told, is not my favorite of all the Star Wars films. It's kind of in the lower tier, to be quite honest. But I can recognize genius when I see it, right? So I think it's why it stands the test of time, and why it's a template is because it establishes, for so many people who are creating new mythologies in film or TV or whatever, it's the perfect example of how you do it. You don't have to start at like the very, very beginning, because as we all know, A New Hope is the middle chapter. So I just think that to me, that's what makes it so stand out in the test of time, is because it is this movie that is a template. It's the be all for people to look at and say, this is how you establish your new universe.
Yeah, that's absolutely what, captured everyone, because you could look at any given scene and be like, there's so much happening in this one scene that is unseen. Feels weird saying that. But I always go back to like the cantina scene where there's all these random people and they are all at different points in their own adventures, and the camera could follow any one of them and it would be a good movie. That's kind of how I feel about it. How about you, Brian? Any thoughts?
I think it's incredible what he came up with for like a first movie, like how detailed a lot of it like was, just to jump into. Although I will say, like, some of my favorite stuff that they came up with, besides the lore and all that, is like, I love like the sound design of the movie and how they like invented the noise for like everything from lightsabers to blasters, to the droids and like stuff that had never been heard before, and how like much work was put into that. I was just watching like some YouTube videos on it like last week, which is really funny. So like the amount of work that like I think it was Ben Burt put into it is like incredible. Like I'm sure he was working with other people. We give him most of the credit though. And how much work he really put into like coming up with sounds that like sounded nothing like anything else, and now just like sound Star Wars. Like one of the best details was like he was explaining how when they're on the Death Star, there's kind of just like a constant low hum the whole time that makes you feel like you're in this gigantic like industrial space station. And so it's like you don't really notice it, but if it wasn't there, it would like there'd be kind of like a hollowness to like the scenes.
Yeah, it's so crazy to have to like create a brand new universe like that, like on that scale. There's certain other things, like you can think of Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, but like they're still riding horses, they're still on a planet, it's trees, they're inventing stuff, but like the amount of just new concepts, I don't know, I really do think it's incredible. One of the scenes that always plays in my head though is both the music and just the scene of the Millennium Falcon landing on the Death Star, and how beautiful that scene is from the get-go, and like how practical they made that, and just like the way the music plays with, it's just building this anticipation, and that scene lasts a really long time, but it's like, I don't know, it's perfect to me. I don't know, how about you, Victoria?
So, A New Hope, I think, is just such a beautiful testament to collaboration. And like you were speaking on earlier with Empire of Dreams, that gives us a lot of insight that like this was not created in a vacuum by one brain. And I think it's just remarkable how in this world building we see A New Hope as like this beautiful, like dynamic entity. Like it is dynamic in so many ways, even though film is fixed. Like you can look at it and see so many new points for this world to break off into. And I think it's just amazing watching how this all came together. Like um for instance, again, speaking through the lens of Darth Vader, like creating a
The
villain.
red lenses of Darth Vader.
But gosh, sorry. What was I saying? I'm sorry, my brain is about as wild as my setting at the moment. We're in the middle of moving. But creating a villain of that scale that is so uniquely him, and so distinct. Like, you know, George Lucas had this vision, and it was very unlike the Darth Vader that we see there, and that we know today. And he had this vision of him like very small and rat-like, at first, and then he was like, "Oh, actually, no, he is 7 feet tall." And then Ralph McQuarrie was like, "Well, how does he breathe if he's going to walk onto this ship in your first part of your script?" And he was like, "Well, maybe he has on a mask." And then all of a sudden, you know, George Lucas has to write his first intro for Darth Vader, because then Ralph McQuarrie was like, "Oh yeah, he's really short and rat-like." And then George Lucas was like, "No. He's 7 feet tall," you know. And so it's just interesting to see how a character can be developed just by talking about it with others and like collaborating on it with others. And that's just, you know, one tiny example, but it was definitely not created in a vacuum, even taking its inspiration from, you know, Japanese films. But and the costuming inspiration and just the lore inspiration, there's just so much of our world inside of this built environment as well. Something that also stands out to me about A New Hope, as far as I don't know if you're going to get tired of me talking about Darth Vader, but you might. So
Never.
I was listening to a panel at a Comic-Con a while back, and they were talking about like the anatomy of a villain, creating a villain, and just the idea of like there are the villain archetypes. Like there's the natural disaster villain, and that's like the tornado in Twister, like the Jaws in or that's not right. Like an earthquake of a variety, and how you navigate that antagonistic energy. And then there is like the beast, and that's like Jaws. Like there is no emotion or humanity to that. And I think that they really do a great job of giving us Darth Vader, and giving us a villain that we can't quite put our fingers on. We don't know if he is the criminal. We don't know if he is the mastermind. We don't know if he is the beast with like a faceless creature. And so I think those gaps, giving giving like the gaps in Star Wars is what's really beautiful, and like the things that we had to fill in. And so the swelling music as he walks across the white hallway, and we just get they build anticipation. And I'm sure I'm going to go listen to Xanthi's podcast and hear what they have to say about all of this. And you don't need to hear what I have to say about music building anticipation, but I think A New Hope does such a
Yeah, I do.
wonderful job about that. I have no education on this, but I just think it's really remarkable how like we like sound and music and lights build our characters for us. But yeah, sorry, I rambled a bit. But that A New Hope is really powerful because Darth Vader is so inhuman. And that's something that's unique to, I think, his character in A New Hope is he is very inhuman. Then we hear him speak and we're like, wait a second, that's a human voice. And then you're like, but is this like we are introduced to droids and like otherworldly creatures at the same exact point, and we're like, what does this look like? Is this a mask or is this his face? Like, it's just really interesting to see. And yeah, that's my big A New Hope chat.
Awesome.
So there are so many things that I'm trying to remember even like one thing that I wanted to comment on, because it's so much that like I can't, it's almost hard to
Yeah.
speak. Okay, one thing. Okay. Okay, so 1,000 things in quick succession. I'm just kidding. Okay, so sound really establishes the world that we live in. That's part of like showing and not telling, going back to the lack of, relative lack of exposition. It's like in the dialogue, it's like these little lines, and it's just little things that we hear that are not explained, where you're just like, oh, I guess that thing makes that sound. Understood. Everything is just like a quick unspoken, like, understood. So when we are first introduced to Darth Vader, we don't hear music, we hear just his breathing. And that is like this, that is the scariest shit ever. And like the fact that it's not even gonna get music to, like, it's just his breathing. Like, we're forced to immediately look him in the eyes, or whatever. We see him, we see just him without like music to underscore what's happening and sway our emotions or whatever. So that's one thing. Another thing is that like Ben Burt originally wanted to have Darth Vader have like all these different clicking sounds and like all these like sound like super mechanical in many different ways. And then, he famously said Darth Vader was starting to sound like an emergency room. So like we just had to pare it down to just just the breathing. It was like too much.
Yes.
It was like the whole damn emergency room.
I've never heard that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that happened. Another thing is obviously, the voices, they definitely had something. They definitely wanted James Earl Jones, like, because they tried it with, they tried it with stuff. But anyway,
Prowse.
I'm not here to like just say behind the scenes stuff, but like also I think it's just really crucial, and something that makes Star Wars unique is, and I think is like crucial to all of these elements that we're talking about, like all these specifics and the collaboration and everything, is that it is not an adaptation. Star Wars that's what it is.
Yeah.
So like in building all these characters, whether deciding if it's like this tiny thing or like this 7-foot tall person, like these are things that it's not like they had to stay true to a source material or whatever. This was written to be played out, not in real life, but on screen. So the thought process of having to think things through in a more 3D and in a more like real way, like to actually reckon with like, what are going to be the mechanics of like how C-3PO walks, or like what are going to be like, it forces you to confront so many other things. And if you think of how collaborative film is with all the different departments to establish, reality in different ways versus, and I say this as an artist and a writer myself, like it's different when you're just writing book. I mean, writing a book is very difficult. Don't want to downplay that at all, but like you're thinking on different scales. And even when you do flesh out details of the world, it is not the same as like and we have to design it. So we have to make it. So we have to figure out how many holes it has. So we also have to figure out how they hold it. So we also have to figure out how heavy it is. So we also have to figure out what sound to create, because depending on how heavy it is, it'll make a different sound when you drop it. Like it's like exponentially more levels and layers of having to put together this world. And I think that is like a crucial thing about Star Wars. And anytime I hear Star Wars being compared to something that is an adaptation, I'm immediately like, this isn't even we're not talking about the same thing. This is not Lord of the Rings. This is not Harry Potter. This is not Marvel. This is not Game of Thrones. This is not Dune. It's different. It started as a film. The books are the adaptations.
Yeah.
That's a
That's
good
a great point.
Well, in talking about the weight of it and things like that, like, even what was like Mark Hamill talked about the lightsabers, right? Where he wanted to like use one hand and like do all these special like things, and George was like, no, it's you have to hold it with two because it's supposed to be heavy. He was like, oh, but that's not how it was. You know what I'm saying? So the fact you bring a good point. Like all those things go into account of how you design and how you fight and everything. So that's not established in anywhere, like you said. And that's why I was saying too, this is the blueprint. Like this is exactly how you want to do it for film, because it's all visual, all the visual cues, and also like the music cues, like you said, like the fact that they let Darth Vader breathe for a few seconds, and then you have the music right after that to haunt, they're trying to build up or whatever. And I feel like every movie, especially, I think the first one's music is good. It's iconic, of course, but I think to me, like I always thought the Empire Strikes Back music is really just where it just blows everything out of the water as far as sound goes. That again, just for themes and whatnot. But yeah, like I totally agree. Like I think that all those things that, George is such a, always already having made like two films, 1138, American Graffiti. He kind of already knew what his strengths or what the strengths and weaknesses of film were, and knew exactly where, I think, as a visual learner or a visual person he knew where to go with the movie, and to attack certain things like, okay, I need to have a visual, just saying this and this and that, because he grew up reading comic books. He grew up going to to the TV, watching TV, but going to the Saturday serials and seeing those things, and he knew how to go, and knew the limitations of what he would be at, and also what he needed to push, because that's why he created ILM. So he knew in order to get what he wanted, he had to figure it out. And so it really is insane to think about how he had all these visions, and he knew what he needed to do, and he knew it could be done, but he had to find the right people. And that's insane to think about. It's like, I can't even fathom doing that. It's like, in your like your early 30s, and you had some success. He basically had American Graffiti made, like that was like a hit movie, and then people were like, oh, okay, cool, like you can make movies now, even though we all didn't like 1138. And then he's like, okay, well, I gotta figure out how to make this movie, so I'll create two companies. Okay, it's insane. It's what I don't think people realize, in my opinion, like what Lucas did back in the day. Like, there's a reason why he didn't direct those movies afterwards, right? I mean, the dude it's bonkers. But yeah, it's the visual language is so incredible in Star Wars. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, he truly was a film engineer. Like you didn't only make the thing; you have to create the tools to make the thing, which means you have to source the material to create the tools to make the thing, which is just crazy. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into Empire, but basically, I'm kind of with the podcast. I'm kind of taking it back from the beginning. So we're jumping in, we're doing episodes on each trilogy, and then we're going to dive deep into each movies as the subsequent weeks happen. So we're hitting them a little quick today, but Empire Strikes Back, my all-time favorite. Paul, you were talking about how the musical themes, like in this one, but by the way, Xanthi, I'll come back on your podcast anytime. But if at all possible, my favorite musical thing ever in Star Wars is the Asteroid Belt theme. It just like it gives me chills, and then it's wonderful. It's the best. Yes, the Exogorth.
Exogorth.
Yeah. But yeah, how do you guys feel? What jumps out at you on this film and how it continued the legacy?
Okay,
The music?
I'll start. Oh, go ahead, Xanthi. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the music is like very, very groundbreaking in many ways. Yeah, that's what I'll say. Also, I listen to the end credits. It's like it's the end credit suite is just is wild. It's also like I don't think any of these are like perfect by any means. It is interesting how things that were fleshed out, or since John Williams didn't know writing Star Wars that this was going to be like a trilogy, let alone more. It's not like he wrote all of these themes as like these airtight, like I don't know, hermetically sealed themes to be the themes for the next several decades. He was just like writing a movie, and seriously, like the themes, like he was thinking about themes, in terms of like leitmotifs, sort of a la like Richard Wagner, in his operas, but he didn't always like get it right because he didn't always know where the character was going to go. In the trilogy, he didn't know the story, right? So like things like writing Leia's theme in A New Hope, he wrote it as a love theme for Leia and Luke. That's why it sounds all romantic. And when he found out that wasn't going to happen, he then had to write new themes for the different relationships that Leia had with the different people, and so Empire Strikes Back is like a really interesting space to both hear new themes and also just like hear how the ones established in A New Hope get maybe crystallized or like used in a new way, or like in a different way. It's like he's finding his footing.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. And what were you going to say, Victoria?
Oh, I was going to mention this is the original sequel to Star Wars. And so just like would our track record would suggest, there were a lot of people that did not like this. They did not like it at all. In a lot of reviews, they were really upset with how different it felt from A New Hope. They were upset with the darkness of Empire Strikes Back. And so it's interesting to see how there was like awesome reactions to this film, but there was a lot of people that did not think that this was true Star Wars. And it's really interesting to see that dynamism. And like Xanthi was saying, they were mentioning how dynamic the story of Star Wars and was the music. But I'm not the same artist I was 6 months ago, a month ago even. And so it's really beautiful how Star Wars has the room for the artists working on it to be dynamic artists and grow with the material itself. Something that I personally love about Empire Strikes Back that wasn't, completely 100% received by a lot of people was that a lot of the action, like, yes, we get these really exciting, we get the duel on Bespin, but most of the action in this film was emotional action and character action. And so I thought that was something just really that resonated with me and makes it my favorite Star Wars film. But speaking of Bespin, I got to talk about it. But there's just so much beauty and poetry in that duel beyond just like the "I am your father" line. We see so much visual symbolism in like the dark blue, the way that George Lucas described Darth Vader. In his first like character study was that he appeared on the wind, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he was very almost ethereal in that way. And so I thought it was really beautiful how they were true to that. Like he was conjured in the duel on Bespin. You hear the force is strong with you, young Skywalker, or the force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet. We hear his voice conjured. We see him coming through the mist of this like blue cloud city. And I think clouds as a motif for um, blindness, and that's something that Luke struggles with is like the I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by chat, so I'm going to move it over. So it's something Luke struggles with, and in his training with Yoda, and seeing clearly. And so we're introduced to the power of the dark side here in a cloudy space. And so I think that that's like such an interesting thing, with like contrasting like the light side of the force being one of clarity, and peace, that the peacefulness being clarity, and then the dark side is one of cloudiness, one of confusion, of misunderstanding, and the temptation that Luke faces on Bespin is really, shown in that. But bridges, just bridges in general, as a beautiful metaphor for conversation and connection, but bridges also as a place of change. And we see in the Duel on Bespin a really interesting space where they're moving across a bridge, instead of it being left to right, we see like a right to left situation, which is almost moving backwards, or I'm sorry, we are moving left to right, but Darth Vader is the one moving left to right. Our protagonist is moving backwards. And so we see like a really interesting thought here, because just as important as I am your father was for Luke, it was all the more powerful for Darth Vader, because one, it makes him a human person, or like capable of like having a son, and like a personage that is beyond the machine, and it connects him to an identity of Anakin Skywalker, which is like him admitting, I am your father. Darth Vader is not his father. Anakin is his father. And it's really interesting right after that duel on Bespin, when Luke has denied him and the existence of him, and like, no, I completely don't accept this. When Luke is like conked out, and like Darth Vader reaches out through the Force, and the first thing Luke rises from the little moment and says father, and immediately he says son. And so there's just something really powerful about that, because it's our first semblance of, is this like a redemption or something, like this person, this villain that was larger than life, what does this look like? Because even the idea of like villain and humanity, and like why, is just a really interesting conversation that they began to unpack in Empire Strikes Back. We hear a lot about the dark side, or a little bit more about the dark side here. And we hear, if you only knew the like power of the dark side, we hear this start to build. And that emotional energy is really powerful. And we start to see more scope. The scope of the Empire, we were still a little unclear about in A New Hope. And in Empire Strikes Back, the scope of the Empire is just like magnificent. And I mean, you know how I feel about Kendall Osel. Some of you, I haven't been around Star Wars in a while, but some of you guys know how I feel about Kendall Osel. But yeah, he gets his stuff handed to him when he tries to mansplain to Darth Vader. I mean, whew, you will get your stuff handed to you.
You gotta pick your battles. You
gotta pick your battles. Yeah. Uncharted settlements, gosh, that's not who I would try to mansplain to, that's for sure. But yeah, I think Empire Strikes Back is just such a remarkable film, and we could unpack this for hours and hours and hours, but I think just there's so much poetry in this film. But my favorite scene out of this entire thing would be the duel on Bespin, as I've already spoken on.
No, absolutely. It's one of the things that really hits me in this film is because I'm a big lore guy. If you follow me, although I think I haven't made lore videos in a while, but I'm a huge lore fan, and originally George didn't really think the Force was going to play like a big part. He was and but this movie really upped the ante, and we got to dive into that because it just captured everyone's imaginations. And of course, I always say that Star Wars is best when it gets weird, and you have your protagonist in a swamp with a droid that's on wheels, and he's trying to be inside of a little mud hut, like eating soup made by a little gremlin dude. You know what I mean? Like it's just a weird scene.
That's my favorite part of the movie. Dagobah.
I love Dagobah, yeah.
But when you think about it, like in terms of it, like you had Star Wars come out, and at that point, Star Wars was still a movie. Like it wasn't its own thing, its own franchise. And this, I feel like, is what cemented, like, yes, this is what movies do. This is what we're gonna do. We're not concerned about that. We're gonna do this. I know. How about you guys?
I definitely agree with how much it kind of expanded the scope of the Force from like A New Hope, where it was kind of like up close magic of just like these aren't the droids you're looking for, to kind of like an all-encompassing of the universe, like untouchable entity that like binds all the things together like we know it is today. And like, the fact that they can hear and communicate like across space, it definitely like changes what the Force was. Like it's hard to like imagine seeing that for the first time, because like I can't put myself in that like mindset, like erase everything I know about the Force to see it the way it was then. But it's definitely interesting to think like how limited it was really when you think about it in the first movie, and how much like it's changed obviously with subsequent movies since. Speaking about like the duel on Bespin, like I definitely think it's definitely a big change from like the big space battle that ends A New Hope. It's a lot more intimate, a lot more emotional, and the stakes, even though it's just two people fighting, seem a lot higher. Than because the Death Star, like we never got to see. I think like it's a giant space station, but you don't see a lot of it from the inside. So it's hard to understand like how many lives were at stake and like how much it really like what the weight of its like destruction was. But like Luke and Vader fighting for like the soul of each other essentially, was definitely like a big change and a lot more like I think emotional in its effect than A New Hope's ending was.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially how claustrophobic the fight gets. Starts out on the big platform, and then it gets like smaller and then smaller and then smaller. And then Vader's reaction when, because Luke is just like, all right, deuces, I'm out.
Yeah, he just goes,
oh.
Something I cannot unsee. I told you Duel on Bespin is my favorite. Something I can't unsee is that if you watch his helmet, it's like blowing in the wind because they had to have a different helmet for action. And so his hair is like blowing in the wind. When he's like doing this, I go, if you only knew that hair blowing in the wind.
And then Element 7 made a video on it recently, but like for years, I just couldn't unsee that when Luke jumps down off of the platform, you see him pop back up right before the scene changes. Like his head and shoulders, like there's a little trampoline down there, and he's just like, "Hello."
I love it.
How about you, Paul? What jumps out at you in the Empire?
Well, to echo everybody, everyone's bringing up great points. I think the Bespin, the Bespin, I think fight scene, lightsaber duel is the best duel in Star Wars, bar none. And I think it's not because it's the most elegant, if you will, or or amazing, because you can always have those. You can always have like a really technical, rad looking fight. The thing about the Bespin fight scene is that it's an emotional fight, and I think that to me is why it has weight. It's not. It's got so much weight to it because it's not just the galaxy. Luke represents the galaxy. Luke represents himself as a son at this point, and he doesn't know it yet. And for Vader, he does. And so when you first watch it, you're just kind of like, again, I don't remember the first time I ever watched it, but I can imagine people who are first watching it saying, this is kind of, Luke's getting his A rung a little bit. Like, what's going on here? And then as you learn it and it unfolds, you're like, oh God. And so when you rewatch it, and again, what makes Star Wars so amazing and all the rewatchability it has, you watch that scene differently. So I've only watched that scene basically as a fan of, a fan of the movie, but I'm sucked in every single time because Luke and Vader, they're going at it, and Luke is he's getting just destroyed, and he's getting more and more angry, and Vader is just like, he's not getting angry yet. He gets pissed off one time, and it's when he gets jammed in the shoulder, and he's like, wait a minute, you just hit me. Like, that's what it feels like. The whole time he's like, ha! Wait, he's like, he changes for a second. Like, he almost loses it for a second, and that's when Luke really gets his arm chopped off, right? So the whole battle is such an emotional thing. And one of the things I remember when the prequels came out, and I love the prequels, full disclosure. A lot of people, said like, well, it's not like the original trilogy or whatever. And I remember Lucas talked about having, a little bit more dialogue in the fight scene. Because obviously in the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul fight, it's just sound effects. And that's cool. I love that stuff. But they try to give more dialogue to Dooku and Hayden, and it's cool. I like that stuff, but it doesn't have the impact because that meeting between Vader and Luke is, you're waiting for it for one film, right? And also they represent like good and evil, and evil's winning. And that's the one thing that I think Empire, that I'll add to this, that I think that like I was kind of, as a kid and as an adult now, that I've had to kind of realize, and I think you kind of take these as you go, but as you live life, that sometimes you're not going to win. Sometimes the good guys aren't going to win. You're going to lose. And it's so really, The Empire Strikes Back represents so much. I mean, I could talk for eons about this movie, but I think if you, at its core, for me, as in the simplest way, I would say it represents to me that failure is going to happen, even the people that you care about and love, but it's not about what happens in that failure. It's about, again, what happens afterwards, that hopeful end that we have, that, Lando and Chewie are going off to save Han. Like, someone they thought betrayed them is actually joining them now and wearing the same clothes. It's very weird. But at the same time, everyone's, Luke's got his hand ripped off, but he's got a new one. And he's like, you know what, we're going to get our friend back. There's that sense of like, we're going to do this still, even though it's kind of bummed we've got our A's wrong a little bit. So I just think that The Empire Strikes Back represents that idea and again, one thing I think gets lost even in the current state of Star Wars. And then again, I'm not a basher of Disney Star Wars by any means. I love pretty much most of it. The thing is that I think one thing that I think Lucas has in spades, and a lot of people kind of lose track of, whether it be the books, movies, comics, whatever, is that these are morality tales. I mean, this is like fairy tales, and Star Wars is supposed to be teaching kids, morality and things like that, and like things about what's good and evil and what's right and wrong. And I think The Empire Strikes Back represents that idea of that, failure will happen, but it's not the end. It doesn't mean it's the end. It just means that it will happen. And you have to kind of learn from your mistakes. So I just love that aspect of it. And I think that Lucas just knew, even though he didn't write the movie, he obviously had his hand in the save everything, very, very much so. But yeah, that to me was always a really important part of the movie. And the last thing about the Force, and I thought was really interesting, is if you read like the early drafts of the movie, they were going to have like the Force be obtained by like the Kyber crystal, that was going to be even before after the Splinter of the Mind's Eye, they're going to have like a lightsaber kind of have like basically explain everything through his lightsaber, and Yoda was going to have. It's crazy. It's the Force has been evolved so much, and that's the thing with George is so cool, is that he never was like, oh, this is the way I thought once, and it's going to be like that forever. He was always constantly changing and going, let's do this, trying to do better. So the Force is, I do love the fact the Force gets kind of evolved in this movie, but it's weird to think of what it could have been. I'm so glad they went the route they did, to be fair. So, but yeah, I think that I love this movie to death.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. I appreciate all the thoughts. I have Rana with a book says, does everyone remember their reaction to hearing Vader say, "I'm your father"? I have no recollection.
Neither me.
It's just always been part of me. Does anyone have any like remarkable experience with it? No.
No, I don't remember. I just always knew that that was the case, and that was a line. I mean, yeah.
I had an interesting. I don't know if Rhonda, you were here when we were speaking on how we got introduced to the original trilogy, but I watched episode 4 first, then 1, 2, 3, and then 5. And so watching 5, I was rooting for Darth Vader because I wanted his I want not like as a villain, but as a human being. Like I wanted things to be better. And so I was like, remember who you are kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like it was a I think that's why I have such a like a visceral reaction to that line, because as much as he is saying as much as this changes Luke's identity, it changes his more. And I just always was like, this is a really big moment of humanity for him. And then like even more powerful than that is the way that they speak through the Force later as father, son, and they address each other with those names. I think that's just like mind blowing. So I guess like because I had watched it wanting, like knowing that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker, the bridge of those characters converged at that moment for me. And so it was really powerful.
That's cool. I love it.
When my only question would be like, when the movie first came out, I wasn't alive. Did people think like he might have been lying? Like, did people just like believe it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was really interesting because if you hear a lot of people I've talked to, and a lot of people, like even Lucas was really concerned about doing that reveal because he was concerned. And this is why I love Lucas. He's a G, man. He just is like, I want to figure things out, and like I want to make sure I do things right. And it doesn't think like a corporate person at all, which I love, right? Because corporate people would be like, that's a good idea, just run with it because it makes money. You know, George, he went to an actual like psychiatrist or psychologist or something like that, and actually asked them and analyzed like what would kids do if they found out that this would happen. And he wanted to make sure it was going to cause mass hysteria, because he knows, even he knew like Darth Vader was like an iconic looking character. He was iconic at that point already, right? So he asked the psychologist, or I think it was psychologist, and the psychologist said they would just, oh, he's lying. That's the first thing he's lying. And that's something that a lot of kids, a lot of people from that era who watched that for the first time, at least I would heard, had said people thought they were lying. Yeah, see, exactly. So I think that's and that's a natural thing, right? I mean, people are going to deny it. I mean, that's what Luke does, right? He's like, that's not true. It's impossible, And so I think it's a natural thing. Like, oh no, that can't be true. He's lying. He's a bad guy, right? How would the bad guys lie? Well, my good friend Justin Bolger, you're out there, buddy. I don't know if he's listening, but Justin Bolger always tell me he loves the Sith because they just tell the truth. They corrupt the truth, but they tell the truth, right? They never lie. They always tell you the truth. And that's the thing that's so crazy about Darth Vader, is he's only telling Luke the truth. I am your father. Like, I am, like, the Emperor's seen you destroying me. Like, these are all things that are true. They're not untrue. And everyone, by that point, everyone, and even the 70s and even now, would all assume that the bad guys are always lying. They're always doing evil. Well, that's not the Sith. And that's a genius thing of George as well. It's like he's telling the truth. So, but yeah, most people thought he was lying. A lot of people thought that there was there's no way. He's just trying to get to him. But yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, moving into Return of the Jedi, that's the whole reason why you brought Yoda back, is to confirm that and have that amazingly awkward conversation where Yoda was like, you know what, I'm just gonna die. He's like, is he my father? And Yoda's like,
I love Dagobah so much.
I'm so tired, man. I got an early
thing.
morning.
Bye.
I got a meeting. You should go.
Meeting.
Yeah.
Like,
Put on his Miss Piggy hat.
Yes. I gotta go talk to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, so like I'm out. Real world is over.
Deuces.
It's to me, I love it because it's an awkward scene on par with what must have been happening behind closed doors before in Empire when he's at the table with Boba Fett, and like I just imagine like, all right, dude, you go hide, and when they come in, I'm gonna stand up, and it's gonna be so cool, like.
Yep.
With all these plates, I don't know. I love thinking about those awkward moments, but yeah, jumping into Return of the Jedi, which is cool because this is the area that we're in with the Star Wars run of the comics right now. Is kind of getting this in between, but I always laugh when they're like, what is your plan, Luke? Like, I'm gonna get captured, you get captured. We're gonna bring him Chewbacca. We're gonna send in the droids. I won't have a lightsaber. And then before he kills us all, I'm gonna do a front flip. It's gonna be sick.
That is such a Luke Skywalker thing. Such a Luke Skywalker thing. I love that.
And we hear the new lightsaber sound, which is snappier.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one.
That's beautiful. Yeah. What jumps out at you guys with this one? There's some thoughts, Nancy?
Okay, so I've been holding off on my Darth Vader thoughts because you know how I feel about Darth Vader. So
You don't have to hold up. Go for it.
I know. It's just I'm like I get choked up because it's too much to express. So Darth Vader's my favorite character, and I feel like knowing already that, like knowing how Return of the Jedi ended and watching. I mean, I probably am in a similar position. It sounds because you already knew like Anakin's, that Darth Vader was Anakin or whatever. I already knew that like he was good. Like I always knew Darth Vader was good inside. Like, and so that's how I always watched Star Wars.
Yes.
And that's why my cat's name is Anakin. And it's so Return of the Jedi is like that ending is so I love it for Darth Vader. I love it for Anakin. I mean, like his son fought for him, and like no one had ever done before,
What?
You're not wrong, man. You're not wrong. It's
Like-
beautiful. It's beautiful.
Like even the Emperor who deceived him on a technicality, like, when he was vulnerable and young and made him believe that, and then basically made him his dark side slave for the rest of his life in that suit with Vader bound to the Emperor. We know we know in the ways that he talks about politics. We know it from the Clone Wars, we know it from the prequels, and we know it from even Darth Vader as Darth Vader in the original trilogy. He is not like a political guy. He doesn't like super care about like not to the degree of like he's playing for this team because he has to because that's just the side he's on, because that's just who he's bound to. He doesn't super care about like all of the details. Like I think he would, but the suit is keeping him alive. I think and at the end when he sacrifices himself too, like he holds out for his son, like they're like saving each other at the end, and it's so beautiful. And like I see Darth Vader's suit as like definitely a physical manifestation of like the ways that he is bound to the Emperor, to Palpatine, and like on a technical level, just knowing about the fact that he couldn't survive without the suit, and knowing how the suit, how uncomfortable it was to wear the suit, and how like just like that suit sucks. It sucks to be stuck in that suit and to rely on it. It's your life support. It sucks to be in that position. And the Emperor who saved, Palpatine, who saved him in Revenge of the Sith, and then medically got him to just be a living shard, for a while, and with no joy. I stay up at night like thinking about if Vader had any sort of joy in his life. It's it's like very and here it's like he knows that he can't survive without the suit, which is made by the Emperor and the Emperor's people, and that he can't really survive without that. But he gives that up. He cuts off his own source of survival basically, to save his son too. It's like, I don't know. It's so beautiful.
And at the very end, we see joy on his face when he sees his son, and that's I never really considered it quite like that, because I don't know, but like, what other joy could he possibly have? You know what I mean? Like, I guess maybe he can play old movies on his mask, but like, it's not like he can go play basketball or something with the friends. It's not like he's going on dates. He can't even eat a cheeseburger and get joy from that. But seeing his son make the decision that he should have, because there's a lot of mirroring between Anakin when he cuts off Mace Windu's hand. There's a lot of mirroring in that scene, and when Vader tosses Palps like a bag of trash. To see his son make the right decision, I'm sure that, like, I love
Like
it.
the Force was definitely part of that, because just to think of someone who's walking in that much denial, like, it really, psychologically speaking, it is really hard when you won't allow, we know from like the Thrawn books, like he doesn't even don't even reference Anakin, like don't even we are not like he died, like he doesn't want to talk, he doesn't want to think about the past, like he is so in such a state of like just trying to stay with it. He can't let himself feel it too much, or it is just going to be unbearable. And here, like, to get to the point where he is like doing this amazing deed, like he would have had to feel this flood of, I like shudder to think about like what it would feel like to suddenly let all that stuff in after not letting it in for so long. Like, it must be extremely overwhelming.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So you mentioned about don't even reference him and letting all of this in. It's like something that was super intense for me was when they're having that conversation on the bridge, and he says, like, I know you were once Anakin Skywalker, and Darth Vader says, that name no longer has any meaning for me. And I made a video about this on TikTok a while back, but that is just so telling. I think that's just one of the most telling lines in that character, because when we are introduced to him as Anakin in episode 1, Padme asks, "Are you a slave?" And he says, "No, I'm a person and my name is Anakin." And so he's holding on to that name as something that gives him identity, personage, agency. And in his like captivity on Tatooine, he had more freedom and personage and agency and hope to be something better. He had his eyes on the skies. He wanted to be a pilot. And so seeing that like Anakin was a name of possibility. And
Shmi would have been a great parent.
Yeah, Shmi would have been a great parent. Yes.
Because I feel like that's also Shmi, how she raised him.
Yes, like you can be more, you are more. And when he says that name no longer has any meaning for me, I mean, he is completely devoid of agency, of identity, of personage. And it's like, yeah, like, oh gosh, no joy, absolutely no joy. And so that's like a really powerful moment on that note. But I didn't want to.
It's also the price of power. He is the right-hand man to the most powerful person in the history of the galaxy, and it sucks.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
High price to power, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Something that like also stood out to me when Xanthi was speaking was just the idea of like the suit and captivity. And that's something that's like very, very heavily hit on in the comics a lot. Just the depths of that captivity, and just how like twins and the number 2 is very powerful in Star Wars, and we see him live his life as Anakin Skywalker as 22 years, and then he's in his suit for 23. Approximately. And so it's just like sad. I don't know. To me, that's kind of telling. Just that extra slice of tragedy. But when he says, "Let me look on you with my own eyes," giving up the suit, but also like he sees him through the eyes of Anakin Skywalker, not the eyes of Darth Vader, not the mask. And I guess like that also brought me to like a lot of people when I used to make a lot of Darth Vader content. One of the things were like they would always say is like, well, why didn't he know that Leia was his daughter? And it's like because he wasn't looking through those eyes. It's like he's not looking through the eyes.
Let me paternity test everyone in the
galaxy.
Like,
absolutely not. But also it's like he didn't even recognize Luke until he reached out through the Force. And it's interesting. Like, obviously, that's not even how he figured out Luke was his child, but and that's important to note. But it's like, I don't know, looking on you with his own eyes. I think that's just something magnificent. That there's so much poetry in everything he says, and then seeing the mirror image that is flipped. You don't know the power of the dark side. I must obey my master. That is one of the saddest lines. And there's so much just like parallelism in if you only knew the power of the dark side, and then you don't know because it's scary. And then just it's really it's terrifying. And the captivity that he's under in that dark side, and like how the dark side and cloudiness, and we get a lot more of that in like just even his lair on Mustafar. I know that we're talking about beyond the original trilogy now, but like there's just so much cloudiness in his story that gets cleared up with that line, because like Mustafar and like there's like those chemicals that the lake secretes that makes you hallucinate there. In one of the comics they mention it, I don't remember. But just even the nature of the dark side and the planet is just so clouded, and then and a shroud of darkness. And so seeing him in that moment of clarity, let me look on you with my own eyes, it's just magnificent. Devastating. It's so funny. I was in the little waiting room right before this, and Chaco was like, I cannot wait for you to talk to Xanthi. You are
Chaco,
going to
is this who you
love
were
them.
when you were talking about Darth Vader when you visited? Chaco, is this who you were like, have you met some person's name? And I was like, no. And you were like,
I thought I just wanted to see.
I see your plan.
The organic meeting. This is
Chaco
this is fate.
Match made
That's
us.
right. That is. Absolutely.
And then just let it play out.
Now there's 2 people that can bring me to tears with Vader talk.
Oh, I love it. I love
You
it.
didn't say anything.
I'm going to shut up after this, and then this is all I'm going to say about Return of the Jedi. This is it.
No,
these
don't
are my
stop.
last 2 points. So I have 1 point. One being that
Ewoks rule.
one being that when he blocks Luke's lightsaber from hitting Palpatine, initially we're watching that and we think, oh, like he's still full of darkness, right? But then we get a little more insight on what that might have meant as we get the sequel trilogy. And I like the strike me down proposition. I think that there's just so much meat in that. And you can see like Darth Vader's redemption was not a light switch. And I think a lot of times it's portrayed to be in like that one moment he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this right thing. No, he was like struggling He's
Yeah.
been struggling this whole time.
The whole
And,
trilogy, I think, is already
yes.
in the whole trilogy. I think we already see Darth. Like, I've never seen Darth Vader as a villain. I can't. He's not scary. He's never been scary to
Yes.
me. And I've tweeted about this several times, like genuine, like just asking people, like, did anyone ever find Darth Vader scary, or is it just me? No, he's always just been conflicted. Like,
Yes. He has been yes, he's just always been conflicted. And so seeing that and then seeing the meat that was added to it in the sequel trilogy is just remarkable. And I think like anyone that is a huge Vader fan that was like, "Oh yeah, I don't know how I feel about Palpatine's contingency. It ruins his arc." I would encourage you to consider how much it actually does the opposite, because Darth Vader didn't yeet Palpatine to save anyone. It was not a hero's journey. It's never been a hero's journey for Anakin and Darth Vader. It was a journey of just love. And so like that's why he's so powerful to me, is like it wasn't about him defeating anything. It wasn't about him like setting balance to the Force. Yeah, it was like fine for that to be a effect, but ultimately it was about love. And like when he looks at Padme on Mustafar and says, "Love can't save you, Padme, but love saved him," and like he's going to express love to try and save his son. It was never about the big picture for Anakin and Darth Vader. It was always, like you said, he was not political. He just wanted to love and be loved. And there's something so powerful about that. And he is us in a lot of ways. Luke is larger than life. And I think that's amazing. Like
I've
he
never
has
related to Luke. I relate to Anakin.
I haven't either. Yes. And so it's like, because he fails, he fears. And like, that's a hero's journey that I can get behind, because I fail, I fear. And I, as someone with like a hugely tender heart and like full of just like, I can't wield a lightsaber, but I can love people super powerfully, and I can like rise from my darkness to reach out to someone. And like, there's just something so powerful in Anakin and Darth Vader's story in that way. But yeah, there's just so much power. Like he is supposed to be this vision of power, and the height of it was expressing love. And there's just something so amazing about that. And I had two things to say, and that was one of them. The second one, what was the other one?
Well, we can always come back if you're having trouble remembering.
This is true. I just wanted you to like know that I was going to shut up after this.
Well,
like guaranteed.
Let me know if it pops back up for you. But
sorry.
No, just kind of like what you're saying is, and what I think really sets Star Wars apart is this notion that it was it's written like it's going to be one of those Saturday serials where it's just the good guy and the bad guy, and the good guy beats up the bad guy and he saves the princess, and then they like fly off somewhere. And that's how we're introduced. And then we get a little bit more nuance. And like, oh, the bad guy's not super, that bad. And there's a worse bad guy there. And then we get to the next level, and it's not about killing the bad guy, it's about accepting him, which ends up being the storyline of every anime ever, where your villain becomes your friend.
Don't get me started.
But I think that's what made it so powerful, is it wasn't about Luke getting strong enough to kill Vader. It was about Luke being strong enough to not kill him.
Courageous enough.
What I mean?
Or courage, literally, the word comes from heart.
Yeah. And that's why I always get irritated, because I always have all these comments of like, well, okay, but who would win, Prime Anakin, or, and you're like, it doesn't, you've missed the point, like we've already derailed here if that's the question that we're asking. None of the fights in Star Wars make sense. Like almost
any
none
of them could win at any time.
Yeah.
With the right motivation, or
yeah. When I look at, like, there's no reasonable reason that Maul lost to Obi-Wan. Like, dead to rights. I don't know how he could do a full 180.
He was meant to lose.
Exactly. But yeah, Paul, your thoughts on Return of the Jedi?
Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, for that matter. I always say, people ask me what your favorite Star Wars movie is, and I say flip a coin between those two films, and it's whatever it lands on is my favorite. But growing up as a kid who loved Muppets and loved Ewoks, this movie was my jam, and I grew up just loving this movie so much. And it's one of those things where I grew up loving this movie. I've seen this movie probably the most of any other film in my life, like ever. Like it's the movie I've seen a zillion times, and it's just one of those things where I think it's perfect. I mean, Xanthi and Victoria did a phenomenal job breaking down Vader and Luke and all that, because that is to me what makes that movie so great. I think it's utterly brilliant, and it's funny because, again, everyone credits Empire for being like the philosophy and all that stuff, and be like, oh, it's just a deep one, it's a deep movie, and they're not wrong to an extent, but I felt like, Return of the Jedi is like, oh, that's that movie where all the teddy bears showed up, and they kind of a lot of it seems like a lot of adults, at least older than me, seemed like they kind of dismissed the movie. I remember growing up. I'm not sure about all of you, but I was always surprised until I got on the internet that people hated Ewoks. I'm like, people hate Ewoks? What? I was like,
I had no idea either.
Yeah, it was weird, right? I mean, I remember thinking, people like they don't like to like live. Is that what it is? Like, I don't know. Like, it's just like I don't get it. Like,
why do you hate joy?
yeah, it's like, why do you hate like pure like innocence? I guess honestly, it's what it feels like. I mean, they eat people, but whatever. I don't blame them.
Innocent, yeah.
Yeah. So it was just weird to me. People like were really hard on the movie, and I remember thinking,
steam in the suits.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. But it was crazy to me because like everything what they all said before is exactly why the movie is genius now, and I feel like the movie has aged so much better than even Empire at this point because of the ending. Because the ending is so beautiful and what it means. And that's the thing about art, right? Whether it's music, film, paintings, whatever, you can always interpret what everyone interprets art differently, and that's what makes art so beautiful, right? Is we all take things out of it that are different, and everyone can, because people talked about how Anakin, it was Anakin's film, and I agree, it's Anakin's everything, but to me, it's about Luke too. I mean, facing the darkness, everything in the end, standing up for what he knew was right, and that again, as a child, that's something that helps evolve my morality and things like that of just living like, even though like everyone like this bad thing is happening to me, like I'm going to stand up and do what's right, even though that's what, in the end, that's what in the end, it's the right thing to do, even though I mean like destroyed or being electrocuted alive, like Luke was to, whatever. But, when Luke throws his lightsaber, to me is just one of the most powerful moments and one of the best moments in Star Wars history. I don't think anyone will ever trump it. It's just, I think Hamill's performance is so, even now, underrated. When he throws out lightsaber, it's perfect. It's so perfect. And I love Palpatine's response. He's like, so be it, Jedi. Like he like dubs him like right there. It's like, it's so good. So good. And anyway, I've talked a lot, so I love the movie.
And Ian McDermott's performance is just
so my God.
Just his lines, you will pay the price for your lack of vision. Like this guy, damn.
Ian anchor, like one of the main anchors of Star Wars.
It's incredible that he did it in all three trilogies. Like that's like insane.
Yeah. He just aged to the right age every time. Like,
oh yeah.
It's crazy, like how young he was in the original trilogy compared to like now.
Yeah,
like, you don't know like that. It's like he's like been the same age the whole time essentially.
Yeah, that's
it's wild.
It aged beautiful, almost as beautifully as our Twilight dancer. What was her name? Lena.
Oh yeah,
Ula.
Yeah. Like damn.
Oh Lord.
But Yeah, I mean, for me, I've said it before. I think that Return of the Jedi, the ending of the film, is peak Star Wars. It's when you have these like three simultaneous storylines happening. Looks like all three of them are going to fail, and then we just get that win, and it snowballs and it snowballs. Plus the whole messaging of like the underdogs, the ones that you didn't account for, those are the ones that rise up and make the difference. You never thought Ewoks would be a thing, but if you played Ewok Hunt on Battlefront 2, like I have, it is horrifying. And actually, Malik, one of our friends, is thinking about making a like a tabletop RPG campaign where all of us play as stormtroopers and we're trying to escape.
I love that.
So I don't think that'd be really fun if everyone has backstories of like trying to make it back to my wife and like you have to try to not die.
Please, I want to be a part of this. Sign me up.
But yeah, I love it. All right, so I mean we're already running. This is just an amazing conversation. I appreciate everyone here. For taking time out of like, holidays are here, but I love talking with you guys, and the people love listening to this. So yeah, I always appreciate it. To kind of wrap things up, I guess I'll put things together at all into one final little ball for everyone to to take and pass around. So I'm gonna ask if you have any final thoughts on the conversation on the original trilogy that we haven't hit, no one else hit, and you want to make sure we don't forget. If you have any expectations, because we're getting the Book of Boba Fett real soon, it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
And then let us know once again who you are and where we can find your awesome content. And I will go to Victoria first.
Okay, I'm gonna be totally honest. Expectations for Book of Boba Fett, I have zero. I have not been on my Star Wars kick. This has not been my Star Wars season, so I haven't been keeping up with any news. So I'm so sorry about that. I don't have any expectations, which is good. I'm going to go into it totally, excited. I'm just excited. So where any final thoughts about the original trilogy? I love these movies. I think, like we were talking about the rewatchability a lot. They hold up because they're both universal and specific. I think there's something so unique and beautiful about that. You see not only like these characters, but you see all of it, what it represents, and like we've been saying, it's a story of love, of collaboration, of heart, and of family and hope, and there's just so much to be said about that, and that's why they have such a lasting power. Where you can find me, I'm on Instagram and TikTok as It's Victoria, y'all. I'm on Twitter as Victoria Vader 13, but soon, hopefully, we'll see. Victoria Vader 13 for now, though. So
I kept expecting you to go into it's about drive, it's about power.
yeah. Oh no, we stay hungry, we devour. Put in the work, and you put in the hours. You can take what's ours.
Awesome.
Stay hungry but never thirsty.
Right. That's right. That's right. I know what's happening.
How about you, Brian?
I agree, obviously, with everyone that these movies hold up so well. I think it's the ultimate staying power of these movies. Can you hear me?
Well, we can now. You cut out for a brief moment, but you're back.
Sorry, my bad. I think one of the the parts of movies that holds up the most over the longest time and was changed the least in the special editions was the sound and the score. Like the visuals, they've aged pretty well. George tweaked them a little bit, but the sound design and the score is like untouchable. And you can kind of like close your eyes and you know where you are in the movie. It doesn't matter And it still sounds incredible no matter what, and it still looks good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, some of the scenes, you go back. I was watching A New Hope a couple weeks ago on the Death Star. Some of it, you're like, some of it looks a little cheesy, especially in New Hope because it was the first one and the budget wasn't all there. But they still look great. What else was it? Book of Boba Fett. Yeah, same. Like, I don't try to like get too many things in my head and expectations to like get upset about, or like I like listening to other people's theories of what happened, but like I don't adopt those as my own. Like that's fine. I like to rid people later when their theories are wrong. I don't give them a hard time. Like some of my friends get very invested, especially with like some of the stuff for Obi-Wan they predicted. I'm like, okay. I just want to see some more of the like monks that live in Jabba's palace, like the spider
Boomer
droid,
monks.
Boomer
Yeah.
monks, baby. Yeah.
the brains in a jar type thing. Like,
So
like
good.
can we get something like just interacting with them? I don't know. Like they're there. What else? That's pretty much it. I would just say like I think the Return of the Jedi ultimately, like I think it is also very similar to my favorite movie, which is The Last Jedi. Like the parallels between the parallel storylines, the like looking out the window, like watching your comrades like die. Obviously, the ending's very different because it's not the same succinct like we've saved each other. It's like we're fighting to save each other. Rey and Ben, and ultimately like they're not on the same page at the end of The Last Jedi, but I think they're both incredible movies. Where you can find me, I don't really post on TikTok at Brian with the Beard. Maybe one day, we'll see. Choco gives me a hard enough time for long enough, maybe. I am active on Twitter though at Ginger Beard Man. The E's are 3s though, so that's me.
And I always have to say that your beard is glorious. I love it so much. I
It's
wish I
impressive.
could rock it.
It
It's
looks
awesome.
okay today. Like I took a nap before this show, so like I kind of like rolled out of bed, but whatever.
That's a beard flex. I don't even know what that means. But how about you, Xanthi?
In summary, I think these hold up so well because they were driven by a person with a strong artistic vision and not a studio. And like what I was saying earlier, that it was a film. Like I think the medium and the vision of how it started is why it's so specific and like loved. And I don't mean by fans, like the people working on it, you could tell this is not like just another like multi-million whatever to do. It was like their pet project. It was like George Lucas's baby. And that tends to be the kind of art that I enjoy the most, where it's someone's passion project, no matter how big or small it is, or how weird it is, or how imperfect it is. I can overlook any amount of imperfect. I would rather so many imperfections and have it be something clearly the creators really love and have spent a lot of obsessive time like getting into it, and even when the budget's not working out and all that stuff. And I do cherish that because it is definitely much harder. It is not like that anymore, and I never thought I would become one of those it's not like that anymore type of people. But genuinely, especially in the last few years with streaming has changed the game so much that everything is being made so much cheaper now. And also just with I don't know, I don't want to go on too much of a rant about that, but like it's very special that we have this trilogy. Like it's very special that we have Star Wars, and I hope that we can remember the little things that made the alchemy what it was come together, because there are some things where like because of the imperfect circumstances that they were under ended up cobbling together the most like iconic, memorable, amazing things. And I think about this also in terms of the sound design, where a lot of those things, it was Ben Burt came up in a super lo-fi way because he was like a kid who was just like, that sounds like my projector. That sounds like, let me just sample this and that. It's not like really done like that anymore. Like I mean, it is in some ways, but just when things are it's harder for something as big as Star Wars now. It has the weight of its past, its legacy, and I just don't ever want Star Wars to become too perfect and like too Wonder Bread, like I
Yeah.
don't not I don't want to say that it's like becoming that or anything, but in some it definitely has lost. It's definitely not doesn't have as much of the patina as like the first couple decades of stuff does.
Mhm.
I still love a
Mhm.
lot of the content now, but a lot of it also I'm like super safe, very super safe.
Yeah.
It's got a lot less of the like, hey George, I was working on this like late last night, like
Yeah.
check this out, like I came up with
Mhm.
this, like how do you feel about this kind of vibe? It's more
Right.
like everything's very planned. There's a lot
And
less
also
like,
oh, if this one director messes up, like we have to like find a new, like it's all very like if
Mhm.
you make a misstep and everyone has a different interpretation of what constitutes a misstep, like
Yep.
you can't please everyone. And so by trying to just like please everyone, and by everyone I even mean just shareholders, because that's a thing now, like
Mhm.
Mhm.
it's so much harder to just let something that might just be someone's like thesis project or whatever like slide by. There's
the
just so
stakes are
many
so
checks that
high.
it goes through, and a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit of a little bit of creativity is sifted with each check that you go through. And so yeah, I hope I just I know that Rogue Squadron is back on now, but when it was at first announced that it was like Patty Jenkins was going to be working on other projects and whatever, I was like, fine. Like if she, clearly her baby is like Wonder Woman and like that thing, like, I mean, I don't need a Rogue Squadron right now. Like I would rather wait 10 years I think, for a Rogue Squadron from some up and coming person who's like, my whole life I've wanted to make a Rogue Squadron movie, and I've wanted to do something with the Rogue Squadron character. Like I have wanted to tell this I've had a Rogue Squadron story brimming in me for like a decade. Like that's the person
Mhm.
that I want to make
Mhm.
name anything in Star
Well,
Wars.
that's like the Mandalorian now, right? With Jon Favreau. I mean, he had this idea for many, many years, and then he pitched it to Kathy, and then they got him with Dave, and then all of a sudden you got this. And that's one thing I've always said on my podcast too, is that I was really excited about the Mandalorian because it wasn't a contrived sit down in front of the in a round circle and say, hey, let's what do we want to sell to the masses? Let's sell the Mandalorian. No, it was Jon Favreau go, I had this idea. I even wrote the script. Here you go. Like he wasn't commissioned to write it. He wrote it on his own passion. And that's the thing about I love the Mandalorian so much. And I love most of Star Wars stuff that we've gotten from Disney from films. So yeah, I totally echo what you're saying, that it's with Disney and you're a corporation. I mean, Lucasfilm was a corporation, but it was run like a small business, and it was one person, and he didn't answer to shareholders, he didn't answer to anybody. And when he sold it to Disney, you just naturally have that kind of less creative. There's more of a concise, like we have to do this way, XYZ, whatever. It's hard, and I think Star Wars is taking is learning from all the processes. And I think that the Mandalorian's a great, at least we can at least show us, at least from a story standpoint. And I agree with most people too about how Star Wars scale is so important to it. And that's the one thing with film, I think, is the medium is so important, is that it keeps that scale of grandness where it's so big and everything. And the Mandalorian, and my honestly, my only criticism of it is it's small. It does feel very concise and in a box sometimes. And again, I even said like a season 2, it felt like we're in a corridor every episode, right? Which is great. It's still a great episode, but it feels small in scale. A film is so much bigger. And that's one thing that I think Star Wars will have to keep. And I think it will keep at some point, but I think it just needs
It needs budget of film, and I don't know. I really hope that Star Wars can save, like, I don't know. I would rather less of trickle and like some big films.
No, I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think we're going to get that still, hopefully, and but I think the problem is now is that because Disney Plus, they need to keep pumping as much as they can for
Yeah.
people. It's
No
like,
one's a bad guy here. It's just this is like what the industry is now.
yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
It's so many things that are bumping heads with each other. Because I mean, I would argue I loved Mando season 1 a lot more than season 2, because I felt like
Really?
most of
Oh,
season 2 felt like commercials for other projects that were coming out. But No, I definitely see both sides of it. George Lucas started his own production companies and stuff because he didn't want to deal with the machine, and then he became the machine, and then he turned into Vader. He was more machine than man, and then like it's just funny how it evolves and changes over time.
Irony.
But I think we are, as soon as we can get to the place where we can split and have people working on their passion projects and understand that Star Wars is not one thing to one person, it's many things to many people. But real quick, Xanthi, where can we find you and all of your content?
You can find me on TikTok at Star Wars Music Minute. You can find my podcast and YouTube channel, Star Wars Music Minute. Darth Chaco was on an episode, and speaking of big, we talked a lot about scale in our episode. We were talking about the end of The Last Jedi. That was one of my favorite episodes of the season. So yeah, definitely check out the episode with Darth Chaco. It's called The Legends of Luke Skywalker, and it was on the battle on Crate. And oh my gosh, it was what a great awesome. That's cinematic Star Wars history right there. As well. Shout out to The Last Jedi. So yeah, you can find me on all those places. And when Book of Boba comes out, like with all the shows that come out, my buddies and I do on Star Wars Music Minute, we do weekly music discussions on each episode. So as Book of Boba is coming out, if you want to chat music and sound design, keep an eye out on Star Wars Music Minute channel.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for joining us. And Paul, my dude P Thug.
Hi.
Any more final thoughts and excitement for Book of Boba?
Yeah, final thoughts. The original trilogy is just, I mean, you could talk for eons about it, and it's and the one thing I would only say that I wish we could talk about more, and it gets understated, and people want to rag on George for tweaking the films. I think it's actually pretty brilliant he did, because what he ended up doing was actually reintroducing it to a whole new generation, and by updating the special effects, because the kids, basically around my nephews are a little older than my nephew's age now, but at the time, like they. You don't want to update it for special effects for them to get invested into it. If it looks old, not every kid, a lot of kids are gonna be like, that looks like my dad's movie. I don't want to watch that. That's not always a bad thing. And I love all my dad's movies too, but there is a sense of like ownership. I think if it looks updated and it looks like something you can identify with, even if it's from a look standpoint of having it look like something you watched just the last week and it looks like it's the latest thing, right? So sorry, my dog's like panting really heavily. The thing is, I think that's so genius is that George, by doing that and updating mainly the first film, but reintroduced this whole idea of like, oh, like the kids don't think it looks that old to them. It looks pretty new, and I think that really helped rejuvenate so many people into Star Wars as younger Star Wars fans and things like that. And obviously the effects in Empire and Jedi were so they're so ahead of their time back then that they still looked fine, when they were released in the mid '90s. So I think it just was really a genius move for him to update those dogfight scenes, even though it's very controversial for me to say that, because a lot of people say, "Give me the originals." It's like the originals are amazing, but like I think it's pretty genius what he did too. So,
so you're seeing exterior shots in Cloud City and Windows.
Yes, thank you.
You can't complain about that.
Exactly.
Victory celebration.
Yeah. Listen, I love Yub Nub as much as the next person, but yeah, I definitely think Victory Celebration is better. Personally, yes. I definitely agree with that. I love Yub Nub. I love both, but I think Victory Celebration as a whole, especially if you think of the whole trilogy or the whole saga, it makes more sense. You have Tatooine, Naboo. It hits all the big places, right? Coruscant. Like you got to see those places, and the music is. Let's be real. It's a lot more. It feels better. It just feels better. Like Yub Nub's I love it, but it's a little silly. But anyway, whatever.
Yub Nub's got a sick bass line though.
Dude, word. You know me. I'm a bass player. Come on, Chaco. I'm a bass player. I got this. I get it. So it's hard to betray myself. Book of Boba Fett. I mean, I love Boba Fett. I've always been loved Boba Fett. I'm not sure how many people were on Twitter a couple of years ago, but it felt like Star Wars Twitter really turned on Boba Fett, and they're like, "All right, Boba Fett's the worst. He's the worst." I'm like, "I love Boba Fett." Like, how could you? Oh, he's worthless. I'm like, okay. It was just kind of weird. People, ragged on him, and then like he had this renaissance last year and everything, and I don't know. I love Boba Fett, so I'm excited for it. Oh, hey, look at, You know, the thing is, for me, I've stayed away from spoilers. I have no idea what's happening. I've only watched the one trailer. I'm trying to stay away from everything, so I'm like completely pure. I'm not even gonna watch it like when it comes out on Wednesday. I'm watching it on Friday with my wife because I want to. Eat pizza and enjoy it. Because my wife and I have this weird Star Wars tradition now because of Disney Plus. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I love Boba Fett. I'm curious, really quick. I'm kind of again, we'll make this go long, but I want to actually kind of ask you all a quick question. That episode where Robert Rodriguez directs, I think it's good. I like it, but it always looks weird to me. It always is filmed kind of, I like it, but it just feels a little off. Did anyone else have that impression when they watched that episode? Just visually like from a visual standpoint, anybody else besides me?
Was this the Twi'lek episode?
This was the one where Boba Fett shows up and he takes his armor and like they're fighting on that hill and Grogu's like just, you know, chilling on the Jedi,
Yeah,
temple.
Second to last.
Yeah.
The whole time I was sitting there watching it, like, why doesn't Din use his jetpack? Like we saw he could remotely call it and control it in episode 2. Do that. Just call it. Call it.
but just from a director standpoint, from visuals, did anyone else felt it looked? It just felt weird to me. I don't know. I can't explain it.
I felt like I was watching it like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay. But I didn't hate that. I think I liked it.
Right. It kind of was jarring for me. And that's the one thing I'm a little worried about with the episode or the season is I don't want it to be like that because it definitely weirded me out. It's grown on me after I watched it. I didn't hate it, but it felt odd to me. So anyway, that's just me. But yeah, I'm stoked for it. I love Boba Fett. So give me more Boba.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for coming out here for talking Star Wars with me. I appreciate people being willing to come and nerd out with me each week. So it's a blast. Special shout out to Brian, who I've been trying to get to join in making some content for like a year now. So thank you. I appreciate all of y'all. And yeah, more to come. There will not be an episode next week. We're taking the week off, but we will be back at it strong the following week, diving into the sequel trilogy. So hopefully we'll be able to see everyone in the chat who's still here with us. But until then, thank you. On to the next one, and may the Force be with you always.